6 armed men crossed my marble lobby, while Matteo DeLuca stared at the keycard I had given away. The chandelier above us burned white against polished brass, and somewhere behind the front desk a printer kept spitting out reservation slips with a soft mechanical rasp that suddenly sounded obscenely loud. Matteo stood beneath the light in a black wool coat, one gloved hand resting beside the gold luggage cart, while his bodyguards spread across the lobby without being told. Italian leather struck marble. Radios whispered. The air conditioning breathed cold against the back of my neck. I kept both hands flat on the reception counter so no one could see my fingers tighten against the stone. "Say it again," Matteo said. His voice never rose. That made everyone else quieter. Behind me, our night director swallowed hard enough for me to hear it. I looked directly at Matteo. "Your presidential suite is occupied." His dark eyes shifted once toward the private elevator, then back to me. "Occupied by whom?" "A guest." One of his men gave a short, humorless exhale. Everyone who worked at the Whitmore Grand knew the rule. Suite 1901 belonged to Matteo DeLuca whenever he was in Manhattan. It did not matter whether the reservation system showed vacant, blocked, or under maintenance. The room stayed untouched, stocked with his preferred mineral water, his brand of bourbon, and fresh white orchids replaced every 48 hours. Tonight, I had overridden that rule with my own manager code. Matteo placed the black keycard on the counter between us. The plastic clicked against the marble. "I arrived 12 hours early," he said. "You knew that was possible." "Yes." "And you still gave away my room." "Yes." The night director stepped forward. "Mr. DeLuca, this was an internal error. Ms. Whitmore acted independently, and we can have the occupants removed immediately." My head turned before he finished. No, the word came out sharp enough to stop the printer. Or maybe someone finally had the sense to turn it off. Matteo's gaze moved from him to me. For the first time, something changed in his face. Not softness, not anger, tension. His eyes traveled over my navy hotel jacket, the silver manager pin at my collar, the curve of my body the uniform had never been designed to disguise, then settled back on my face. "You are Claire Whitmore." It was not a question. General manager. The woman who decided she could give away something reserved for me. The brass clock behind him ticked once, twice. I decided someone else needed it more. One of his guards shifted his weight. The leather of his shoulder holster creaked beneath his coat. Matteo did not look away from me. "More than I do." "Tonight?" "Yes." That finally moved him. Not much. Just one slow step closer until the scent of cedar, cold wool, and expensive tobacco crossed the counter between us. "Do you know what people usually do when I arrive?" "Give you what you want." His mouth almost moved. "And you didn't." "No." He picked up the keycard, turned it once between his fingers, then slid it back toward me. "Take me upstairs." The night director opened his mouth again, but Matteo lifted one hand and the entire lobby froze. His eyes stayed on mine. "I want to see who made you decide my suite belonged to them." I led Matteo toward the private elevator, but 3 hours earlier, no one in that lobby had looked at me like I had the power to deny him anything. At 6 that evening, the Whitmore Grand was running at 99% occupancy. Every brass luggage cart was in motion, and the marble beneath my heels vibrated with rolling suitcases, ringing desk phones, and the low pulse of piano music from the lounge. Warm amber light spilled from the chandeliers, catching on champagne glasses and polished walnut, while the scent of lilies from the lobby arrangements mixed with espresso drifting from the bar. I moved from problem to problem with my tablet against my hip. A honeymoon reservation had been duplicated. A senator's security detail wanted an entire corridor cleared. A family from Denver had arrived to find their adjoining rooms separated by 6 floors. I fixed each one without raising my voice. Move the Park Avenue reservation to 1420 and comp breakfast. I slid a key envelope toward a concierge. Put the Denver family in 1108 and 1110. Take the connecting room out of inventory before housekeeping releases it. A bellman twice my size nodded and moved before I finished the sentence. That was how the hotel worked when I was on the floor. People rarely noticed me until they needed something impossible. Then they found me. Near the champagne bar, a woman in a silver designer dress watched me adjust the velvet rope around the VIP elevators. She had spent the afternoon complaining about everything from the firmness of her pillows to the width of the hallway outside her suite. When I passed, she let her gaze drag over my navy jacket, my wide hips, and the curve of my stomach beneath the tailored fabric. "You're the general manager?" she asked. "Claire Whitmore." I offered my hand. She ignored it. Her bracelet chimed softly against her glass. Interesting choice for the face of a luxury hotel. The woman beside her covered a smile with 2 fingers. I tucked my tablet under my arm. "Was there something wrong with your stay, Ms. Langford?" "Not yet." Her eyes flicked down again. "I just assumed management would want someone a little more polished in the lobby." Behind me, a service elevator chimed. Housekeeping carts rattled across tile. I straightened the gold name pin at my collar. "Then it's fortunate my job is to run the hotel, not decorate it." The bartender stopped polishing a glass. Ms. Langford's smile hardened, but before she could answer, my earpiece crackled. "Claire, we have a problem with inventory." I turned away from her without asking permission. At the front desk, my assistant had the occupancy screen open. Every room glowed red. Sold, sold, sold. Even the emergency hold rooms had been released after a convention extended its stay. Only one line remained black.
Présidentielle, suite 1901.
DeLuca hold. Do not release. My assistant lowered his voice. "That room stays blocked, right?" I stared at the screen. Matteo DeLuca was not due until the next morning, but his suite was protected as if he were already sleeping in it. Fresh orchids upstairs. Private elevator access. Security protocols active.
No substitutions.
No exceptions. I tapped the screen once and locked it again. "It stays blocked," I said. At that moment, I still believed rules existed for a reason. Then the revolving doors began turning behind me, letting in a woman carrying a little girl, and within minutes I would decide that Matteo DeLuca's most protected room belonged to someone else. The revolving doors turned once, and a woman stumbled into the lobby with a little girl pressed against her chest. I was already moving before the doors stopped spinning. The woman's housekeeping coat was half-buttoned over gray sweatpants, and one sleeve was damp from melted snow. Her name tag read Nora Vasquez. I knew her. She worked mornings on floors 14 through 18 and always left 2 peppermint candies beside the front desk coffee machine after her shift. Tonight, there was no candy in her hand. There was a child. The girl looked about 8, wrapped in a thin pink jacket, her cheek resting against Nora's shoulder while her sneakers dragged over the marble. The lobby smelled of lilies and roasted coffee, but when Nora reached me, I caught the sharper scent of cold air, wet wool, and the menthol ointment someone had rubbed beneath the child's nose. "Claire." Nora's voice cracked around my name. "Please." I touched the back of the girl's neck. Heat burned against my palm. "How long has she had the fever?" "Since this afternoon." Nora kept glancing through the glass doors behind her. I tried urgent care. They said the wait was 4 hours. "I can pay Friday. I just need somewhere safe until morning." I waved over a bellman. "Bring bottled water, clean towels, and the first aid kit. Now." He ran. Nora caught my wrist. Her fingers were ice cold. "Not the employee lounge." I wasn't going to put you there. Her grip tightened. A phone buzzed inside her coat. She flinched so hard the girl stirred. Nora pulled it out, saw the screen, and shut it off without answering. He knows I left, she whispered. I didn't ask for a story. I didn't need one. There was a fading bruise along her jaw that powder had not hidden, and when the revolving doors moved again behind us, she turned her entire body between the entrance and her daughter. I opened my tablet. Every room was red. Sold. 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 The screen reflected chandelier light across my fingers. Claire, my assistant said quietly, we have nothing. Check maintenance holds. Released. Late arrivals? Guaranteed. Nora shifted the child higher against her shoulder. The girl made a small coughing sound and curled her fist into her mother's collar. My eyes dropped to the one black reservation line I had checked minutes earlier.
Présidentielle, suite 1901.
DeLuca hold. Do not release. The rule sat there in capital letters. I reached beneath the desk and took out the master key encoder. My assistant stared at me. You can't. Watch me. I entered my manager code. The machine gave a soft electronic beep. Claire, that suite belongs to Matteo DeLuca. Tonight it has a bed, a locked door, and no guest inside it. He could arrive early. I slid a blank black keycard into the encoder. Then I'll deal with him. Nora shook her head.
No.
I can't cost you your job. I placed the finished keycard in her palm and closed her fingers around it. Floor 19. Private elevator. Don't open the door for anyone except me. Then I looked at my assistant. Remove Nora's name from the visible guest notes and route every call about 1901 directly to my phone. The elevator doors opened with a muted chime. Nora stepped inside with her daughter, clutching the black card to her chest. As the doors closed, my desk phone rang. I answered. Front office. A man's voice came through, calm and precise. Ms. Whitmore, Mr. DeLuca's convoy is 10 minutes away. I hung up the phone, grabbed the medical kit, and stepped into the private elevator before anyone could stop me. The doors sealed with a padded metallic thud, cutting off the piano and crystal glass chatter of the lobby. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar polish and expensive cologne, remnants of a space prepared for a man who treated hotels like temporary kingdoms. Floor 19 required executive clearance. I pressed my thumb to the scanner, watched the green light blink, and felt the elevator rise beneath my feet. When the doors opened, Nora was still standing in the corridor with her daughter sagging against her shoulder. She had not entered the suite. I can't do this, she whispered. The hallway was silent except for the low hum of recessed lighting and the distant rush of ventilation. Thick cream carpet swallowed every step. At the end of the corridor, Suite 1901 waited behind double walnut doors with brushed brass handles. I took the black keycard from Nora, opened the doors myself, and turned on the lights. Warm gold flooded over Italian marble velvet chairs, a dining table set for 6, and floor-to-ceiling windows looking down across Manhattan. White orchids stood beside a bottle of bourbon that cost more than Nora probably made in a week. I walked straight past all of it. Bring her in. Nora hesitated. Claire, your daughter needs a bed. That ended the argument. I pulled back the crisp white comforter while Nora lowered the girl onto the mattress. The child's cheeks were flushed, strands of damp hair stuck to her forehead, and her breathing came fast through parted lips. I filled a glass with water, soaked one of the clean towels, and laid it across her brow. Then I used the hotel phone. Send our on-call physician to 1901. No name on the request. Bill it to my manager account. I opened the suite minibar, removed the bourbon, and replaced it with bottled water and juice from the service cart outside. Mateo's tailored robe hung in the dressing room. His monogrammed garment bags waited in the closet. Everything about the suite announced ownership. I closed the closet doors. Tonight, ownership could wait. My radio crackled at my waist. Claire, DeLuca vehicles just turned onto 57th. 5 minutes early. Nora looked toward me. Go, she said. I'll explain if I have to. No. I crossed to the security panel beside the door and disabled standard housekeeping access. Then I programmed the lock so only Nora's card and my executive master would open it. One deliberate beep confirmed the change. Nobody explains this except me. The physician arrived as I stepped back into the corridor, carrying a black leather case that smelled faintly of antiseptic when he opened it. I gave him one instruction. She stays here until that child is medically cleared. Then I took the elevator down. Halfway to the lobby, my phone began vibrating with messages. Executive office, front desk, security. By the time the doors opened, the hotel had changed. The piano had stopped. Bellmen stood motionless beside their carts. 2 black SUVs idled beyond the glass entrance, their headlights washing white across the marble floor. Matteo DeLuca entered between 6 men in dark coats. He removed his gloves 1 finger at a time and handed them to the nearest bodyguard without looking away from me. My night director hurried forward. Mr. DeLuca, welcome. There's been an issue with your accommodations, but we're correcting it now. No, I said. His head snapped toward me. Matteo's did not. I walked around the front desk and stopped 10 feet from the man whose locked suite I had just reassigned. Nothing is being corrected. Matteo's gaze settled on my silver manager pin. Then perhaps, he said quietly, you should tell me exactly what you did. I gave your suite to one of my housekeepers and her daughter, I said, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the chandelier above us. Somewhere near the bar, ice shifted inside a silver bucket with a faint crack. The lobby smelled of lilies, espresso, and the cold wind carried in on Matteo DeLuca's coat. He stood 10 feet from me, black gloves gone, dark eyes fixed on my face while 6 bodyguards formed a quiet wall behind him. My night director stepped between us before Matteo could answer. Mr. DeLuca, this is completely unauthorized. I can deactivate Ms. Whitmore's credentials, relocate the occupants, and restore the suite within 15 minutes. He reached toward the terminal. I caught his wrist before his fingers touched the keyboard. Don't. His eyes widened. Claire, move. There is a sick child upstairs. There is a contract downstairs. He pulled free and turned to security. Send someone to 19. 2 hotel guards started forward. Matteo raised one hand. They stopped. Not because he was their employer, because everyone in that lobby understood what his silence meant. The brass clock behind the desk ticked loudly enough to count seconds. Matteo looked at my director. If anyone opens that suite before I do, your hotel will have a much larger problem than an occupied room. My director's face lost color beneath the warm lobby lights. Matteo turned back to me. Why my suite? Because every other room was occupied. There are hospitals. The child had already been waiting for care, and her mother needed a locked door tonight more than you needed 1,800 square feet and a bottle of bourbon. One of his men glanced at me. Another looked down, almost hiding a reaction. Matteo did neither. He stepped closer until the polished marble reflected the dark line of his shoes beside mine. You know who I am. Yes. You know the arrangement this hotel has with me. Yes. You know that room remains mine whether I'm standing in Manhattan or 500 miles away. Yes. His gaze dropped briefly to the silver manager pin on my jacket. And you still used your own override code. I reached into my pocket, removed the executive master keycard, and held it between two fingers. I did. He took it from me. The plastic disappeared into his palm. For 1 second, I wondered whether he would hand it to his security chief and have the entire floor cleared. Instead, he turned toward the private elevator. Show me. My director hurried after us. Mr. DeLuca, I really must insist that hotel management accompany. Matteo stopped. She is hotel management. For words. Nothing more. Yet my director remained where he was. I pressed my thumb to the elevator scanner. Green light. The doors opened, revealing brushed steel walls and a strip of cool white light overhead. Matteo stepped inside with me and held up one finger when his men moved to follow. Stay. The doors closed on 6 armed men, one pale director, and an entire lobby pretending not to stare. The elevator rose. No music played inside the private car. Only the soft mechanical hum of cables and the faint rasp of Matteo's thumb moving across the edge of my keycard. If you lied to me, he said, watching the floor numbers climb, you lose your job tonight. I met his eyes in the mirrored wall. And if I didn't? The number 19 illuminated with a muted chime. Matteo slipped the keycard into my hand as the doors opened onto the silent cream-colored corridor. Then I want to see what you saw. I opened Suite 1901, and Matteo DeLuca stopped so abruptly that the door nearly swung back into him. The room was dim except for the amber bedside lamps and the blue glow of Manhattan beyond the glass. Warm air carried the clean scent of eucalyptus from the humidifier the doctor had switched on, mixed with the faint antiseptic smell of an open medical kit. Matteo's untouched bourbon still waited on the bar beneath a silver lamp. His orchids stood beside it, white and perfect. None of that held his attention. Nora sat in an armchair beside the bed wearing her housekeeping coat, both hands wrapped around a paper cup of water. Her daughter slept beneath Matteo's white comforter with a cool towel folded across her forehead. The hotel physician was fastening his stethoscope back into his leather case. Temperature is coming down, he said quietly. Fluids, rest, and monitoring tonight. If her breathing changes, call me immediately. Nora stood when she saw us. The cup trembled between her fingers. Ms. Whitmore, I can leave. No. I crossed the room and adjusted the towel on the girl's forehead. The fabric had already grown warm. Matteo remained near the doorway. He looked at the child, then at Nora's damp coat folded over the chair, then at the tiny pair of wet sneakers sitting on the marble beside his custom Italian loafers that housekeeping had placed there for his arrival. No one spoke for several seconds. The heating vent whispered overhead. A cab horn floated 19 floors up from the street. This is who you gave it to, Matteo finally said. I straightened. Yes. Nora rushed forward. Mr. DeLuca, she didn't know I would come here. I asked her for help. Please don't fire her because of me. Matteo's gaze shifted to me. You didn't tell her whose room this was. She didn't need another reason to refuse help. His jaw tightened once. And you thought you could decide what I needed. I stepped between him and the bed. I knew exactly what you needed. His eyes narrowed. Careful. You needed a place to sleep. I pointed toward the windows, where hundreds of hotel lights burned across Midtown. You have drivers, security, money, and 20 other hotels within 5 minutes. She had a sick child, no safe room, and nowhere else she trusted enough to walk into. Nora lowered her head, gripping the paper cup harder. I kept my eyes on Matteo. Your inconvenience had somewhere else to sleep. They didn't. The room went still. Matteo looked past me again. The little girl shifted beneath the comforter and murmured something too soft to understand. Nora immediately moved to the bedside and brushed damp hair from her daughter's cheek. Matteo watched the gesture. Then he reached into his coat. Nora recoiled before she could stop herself. Mateo noticed. His hand paused. Slowly, he removed his phone instead. Marco, he said when someone answered. Move my luggage to 1812. A beat of silence came through the speaker. Mateo's voice hardened. That was not a suggestion. He ended the call and placed the phone on the marble bar beside the bourbon. I stared at him. You're taking a standard room? Apparently I have somewhere else to sleep. He lifted the bottle, considered it, then set it back untouched. When he turned toward the door, he stopped beside me. The mother and child stay here until you decide they no longer need it. His eyes held mine. And Claire? Yes. He glanced once at my silver manager pin. From now on, no one in this hotel overrides your decision without answering to me. Mateo did not return to the lobby after leaving Suite 1901. He walked with me one floor down and stopped outside room 1812 while his men carried luggage worth more than most guests' cars through a doorway barely half the size of his usual suite. The hallway smelled of fresh carpet and furniture polish, and the ice machine hummed behind a brass-paneled alcove. When one of his bodyguards opened the room, Mateo looked at the queen bed, the narrow writing desk, and the single window facing a brick tower across 57th Street. This is what you give normal people? He asked. Normal people usually seem pleased. He set his coat over the back of a chair. I may have been spoiled. I almost smiled. Almost. My radio crackled before I could answer. Claire. Executive office wants you downstairs immediately. Mateo heard it. About the suite. Obviously. I turned toward the elevator, but he stepped into the hall beside me. I'm coming. You don't need to. Neither did you. The elevator carried us down in a cold silver box filled with the faint scent of his cedar cologne and my hotel's industrial cleaner. When the doors opened, my night director and two corporate executives were waiting beside the front desk. The piano had started again, soft and controlled, as if someone believed music could erase what had happened. My director held a printed incident report. Claire, surrender your executive key and access credentials until morning review. I unclipped the silver card from my belt. Before I could place it on the counter, Mateo took the paper from his hand. He read exactly one line, then tore it cleanly in half. The sound was small. Everyone heard it. Mr. DeLuca, one executive said, this is an internal personnel matter. Mateo set the pieces on the marble. Then internally understand this. She made the correct decision. She reassigned contracted inventory without authorization. My inventory. His voice dropped. I am authorizing it now. The executive's mouth tightened. After the fact. Mateo turned to me. How much did the doctor cost? The question caught me off guard. That isn't relevant. How much? $450. Charged where? I looked at the desk. My manager account. His eyes stayed on me. And if the hotel refuses reimbursement, then I pay it. He was silent for a moment. The lobby lights reflected in his dark eyes. You've done that before. I did not answer quickly enough. His gaze shifted toward the concierge station, where a small locked cash envelope box sat beneath the desk. You cover employees when policy doesn't. Sometimes policy is slower than emergencies. Mateo reached into his jacket, removed a black card, and placed it on the counter. Every expense connected to 1901 goes there. I pushed it back. Nora is my employee. He pushed it toward me again. And tonight she is under my protection because you put her in my room. The difference in his voice made my fingers stop against the card. Not possession. Responsibility. He looked toward his security chief. Put 2 men on 19. Plain clothes. No weapons visible near the child. Then back to me. You chose who needed that room. I'm choosing what happens next. My radio crackled again. Security desk.
Urgent.
Claire. There's a man at the front entrance asking for Nora Vasquez and her daughter. I reached for the radio, but Mateo's hand closed over it first. His face went still. No one tells him where they are, he said. And no one lets him past that door. The man asking for Nora hit the glass entrance with his palm hard enough to rattle the brass frame. I saw him through the lobby doors before security could pull the velvet barrier across. Heavy black jacket. Red face from the cold. Two men stood behind him near the curb, pretending to study their phones while another dark sedan idled beside Mateo's SUVs. The revolving doors hissed every few seconds, letting in sharp winter air and the smell of exhaust from 57th Street. Mateo's hand released my radio. Is that him? I've never met him. I have, Nora's voice said behind us. I turned. She stood barefoot at the edge of the private elevator, wrapped in one of the suite's white robes, her face drained beneath the lobby's warm chandelier light. His name is Darren Pike. Mateo's security chief moved immediately. Take her upstairs. No, I stepped between them. If Darren sees her, he knows exactly where to push. I crossed behind the desk, opened the hotel security console, and pulled up the camera grid. 19 floors of elevators, service corridors, stairwells, loading docks, and guest hallways filled the screens in cold blue squares. Lock public elevator access above 17. I told engineering through my radio. Service elevators too. Stairwell doors stay exit only. Move every guest on 18 and 19 to the ballroom level through the west service route. My night director stared at me. Claire, we cannot evacuate 2 floors because of one angry man. The outer door slammed again. Darren shouted through the glass. Nora, I know you're in there. Several guests turned from the lounge. Phones came out. I pointed at the bell captain. Close the lobby curtains. Move guests into the ballroom. Tell them there's a security issue with the front entrance. Then I looked at my director. You can fire me tomorrow. Mateo's mouth tightened at the corner. She won't be fired. Darren shoved past the first security guard when the inner doors opened for a departing guest. Mateo's men moved, but I caught his sleeve. Not here. Crystal glasses lined the bar 20 feet away. Families stood near the elevators. One wrong move would turn my lobby into panic. I pressed the emergency control on my tablet. The brass fire doors between the main lobby and elevator bank slid shut with a deep mechanical rumble. Darren froze on the wrong side. His 2 men rushed toward a service corridor. I tapped 2 more commands. Steel access doors locked ahead of them with sharp electronic clicks. Camera 12, I said. Mateo's security chief looked at the monitor. Got them. Take them through the loading dock. Quietly. He nodded and disappeared with 2 men. Darren stared through the glass partition at me. You fat little desk clerk, he shouted. You think you can keep my family from me? Mateo moved before I did. I stepped in front of him. My hotel. His eyes dropped to mine. Claire. My rules. I unlocked one interview room beside security and opened its door. Darren comes in there. No guests. No spectacle. Mateo studied me for 1 second, then gave a single nod. Darren was escorted inside minutes later, still shouting. But the sound died when Mateo entered behind me and closed the padded door. The room smelled of stale coffee and cool metal from the filing cabinets. Darren recognized him immediately. His voice vanished. Mateo placed both hands on the conference table. You came here for Nora. Darren looked at me instead. She belongs with me. I slid a hotel incident form across the table. No one staying under my roof belongs to you. Darren laughed once. Mateo did not. You heard her. Outside, my radio crackled. 19th floor secured. Nora and her daughter safe. Mateo leaned closer to Darren, his voice almost conversational. You walked into her hotel believing she was the weak point. He glanced at me. That was your mistake. And for the first time that night, the most dangerous man in the room was not the one deciding what happened next. I was. 3 weeks later, I stood beneath the same chandelier while the board prepared to fire me for the room I had refused to take back. The Whitmore Grand had reopened its ballroom after the security incident, and tonight the marble floors shone beneath hundreds of candles reflected in mirrored columns. A string quartet played near the staircase, bows whispering over polished wood, while servers moved through the warm room carrying trays of champagne and rosemary-scented appetizers. Nora was there too. Her daughter stood beside her in a navy dress, healthy enough to steal 2 chocolate-covered strawberries when she thought I wasn't looking. Darren had left the hotel that night under police escort after Nora chose to make a formal report. Mateo had made no threats and asked for no favors. He had simply placed his attorney beside her until the paperwork was finished, then arranged temporary housing where she and her daughter could sleep without anyone pounding on the door. Now Nora wore her housekeeping supervisor pin for the first time. I had promoted her that afternoon. The chairman of the hotel board waited until the gala was full before approaching me. Claire, we need a private conversation. Then this is a strange place to start one. His jaw tightened. Your handling of Suite 1901 exposed this property to unacceptable liability. Corporate has decided to terminate your employment after tonight's event. He held out an envelope, thick cream paper.
Betrayal.
My name centered neatly across the front. Around us, silverware chimed against china, and the quartet continued playing as if nothing had changed. I reached for the envelope. Mateo took it first. He had arrived without announcement, dressed in a black tuxedo, his security keeping their distance near the ballroom doors. The chairman stiffened. Mr. DeLuca, this doesn't concern you. Mateo opened the envelope, read the first line, and handed it back. It concerns my contract. Your accommodation agreement is separate. Not anymore. He motioned toward a man carrying a leather portfolio. Mateo's attorney placed several pages on the cocktail table between us. Effective tonight, Mateo said, every DeLuca lodging contract, private dinner, conference reservation, and corporate event in Manhattan remains with this hotel under one condition. The chairman looked down. What condition? Mateo turned toward me. Claire Whitmore has final operational authority over them. The chairman's face hardened. You cannot dictate our management structure. Correct. Mateo lifted his champagne glass but did not drink. You can reject the contract. The chairman looked at the number printed on the final page. His fingers stopped moving. I could smell beeswax from the candles and Mateo's cedar cologne beside me. The quartet reached the end of a song. Applause rolled through the ballroom. There is one more clause, Mateo said. He slid the agreement toward me. My eyes found it halfway down the page. Presidential Suite 1901 would remain permanently reserved under the DeLuca account. Its release, however, would belong exclusively to the general manager's discretion whenever she determined another guest faced an emergency need. I looked up. You put this in writing? You already proved you don't need my permission. Across the ballroom, Nora pressed one hand to her mouth. My night director stared at the contract. The chairman slowly lowered the termination envelope. Ms. Whitmore, he said, perhaps the board should reconsider. I took the envelope from his hand, tore it once across the middle, and placed both halves beside Mateo's untouched champagne. Then I crossed the ballroom to Nora and pinned the supervisor badge properly against her lapel. When I returned, Mateo held out his hand, not to lead me behind him, not to pull me into his world, simply to stand beside him. I placed my hand in his, and beneath the chandeliers that had once watched everyone underestimate me, Matteo De Luca smiled at the woman who had given away his best room, because he had finally understood that the person with the power was never the one who owned the suite, but the one who knew who needed it most.